Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode in our Animal Month, where we have the Inside Movies Galore crew once again. Hello, Dustin.
Hey.
Hey, Katie.
Hello.
Hey, Jake.
Hi.
And hey, Brandon.
Yo.
So tonight we are going to be discussing an animated film from 1994 that was, in fact, directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff. And I'm just going to read off the inscription of what a biography of what the film is about from the IMDb.
Should we mention that it's Disney's Lion King?
It is
That's important.
Disney's The Lion King, and so we have a lion cub crown prince is tricked by a treacherous uncle into thinking he caused his father's death and flees into exile in despair, only to learn in adulthood his identity and his responsibilities. So spoiler alert for those who don't know this yet and haven't seen this film. Although, if you haven't, then there's something.
If you haven't seen this film, you're 3 years old.
I don't know. There's probably some 3-year-olds that have seen it.
Well, I'm sure there are, but those are the only people I can imagine not having seen it.
But in any case, to get started, we're going to get everyone's impressions. So I'm going to start off with you, Dustin. Where did you? Was this a first-time watch, or was this a rewatch for you?
You kidding me? So I grew up in the 90s, and so I saw this when it was new. This is kind of one of the first. This is one of the first Disney movies that your relatives buy you for Christmas when you're a little kid. And so, yeah, I've seen this plenty of times.
Okay.
I mean, I remember thinking it was okay the first time I saw it, but not being like I wasn't one of those kids who was like super, super into it. Like it was good. It was just kind of, it wasn't quite my thing.
Okay.
And it still holds up as a pretty good movie. Man, it's kind of figure out how to say stuff about it without being like cliched. It feels like it's been covered so much. Like I cannot imagine people not having seen this.
Yes,
I really can't.
But your thoughts and your explanation of it might be different than the way somebody else might describe it. So
well, it's basically like Macbeth with animals.
Okay. Going on to Katie, why don't you tell us your first impressions of this film?
Well, like Dustin, this was a rewatch for me as well, and I grew up in the 90s also, and this was like the one Disney movie that stuck for me. I feel like everybody kind of gets one, or at least those of us who grew up during this Renaissance age of Disney where they were putting out like a new Disney movie every year or whatever. None of the other ones ever stuck for me, but The Lion King, that was the one. So it's a movie I've seen countless times throughout my life. But I recently got to see a stage adaptation of it. My daughter was actually on the crew for The Lion King Jr. Here in West Dallas. And it was such a cool stage performance to see. I really enjoyed that, and it kind of revived my love for the film, from when I was a kid. To see kids performing it was very cool. So yeah, I feel like it's one of those films that it really stands up well. There's a few little pop culture references in it, but like otherwise it feels really timeless. And it's such a human story being told strictly by animals, which I think just makes it like a fairy tale. It's just very impactful film. It was one that, like I said, the only one that really ever stuck with me as a kid. So I was excited to see it again.
Isn't it though? I mean, when I first saw this film, I was 10 years old. And I saw it at the drive-in theater when the drive-in theater was right down the road here on 27th Street. And I remember distinctly because my parents took me to it. And right afterwards was The Client, and that beginning scene in The Client, my mom said to us, "Oh, I don't want us to watch this film." So guess what was behind us playing? The Mask. So we after The Lion King, we turned on The Mask and watched the rest of that. So that was my first experience with this film, and then later I owned it on VHS or whatnot. Although I never had that clamshell that supposedly had the words "sex" involved with it, so I don't know what they were talking about.
I had that clamshell.
But anyways, going on to Jake. What was your experience with this film? Was this a rewatch or a first time?
Oh, this was definitely not my first time with this one. I actually was one of those kids that, you know, grew up with all kind of Disney films, and the so-called Disney Renaissance. I think this was the fourth film in that, you know, following Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. And of course, I had been a big fan of all of those. One of my very clear memories from elementary school was fifth grade music class doing the songs from The Little Mermaid. So it's like music and Disney work kind of went hand in hand for me for a long time. So obviously, as great as the soundtrack and songs and score for this film was, I have always been really big into the music for this movie. And in terms of the story itself, yeah, I kind of agree with the idea that it is one that is a little more, I guess, kind of like Katie said, kind of sticks, if you will. As far as the ones from that time period, like Aladdin has not aged as well as I'd like to think. Uh, and I've always been offended by the inaccuracies in Pocahontas. I've never, you know, but Lion King holds up, you know, pretty darn well.
Well, yeah, especially since Pocahontas was 12 years old at the original meeting.
Oh, that's
John
just the
Smith.
start. That's a whole other discussion there, and we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that later. But as far as this one goes, sure, it's not perfect, and there's always been controversy about what the real inspirations for the film were and all that kind of stuff. It was supposedly Disney's first original animated feature, and yet it's always been dodging questions about its actual originality, but it's still a damn good film. So yeah, and I couldn't count how many times I've seen it. I wouldn't even guess. I'd say it's up there.
Alrighty, going over to Brandon. Was this a first time watch for you, or was it a rewatch for you? What was your first experiences with this?
I feel like that's a silly question in this context.
Well, we're talking about the live action, right?
No, that's still to come.
Yes.
Kimba the White Lion, is that the one we're talking about?
It's the same.
If you ask Matthew
I
Broderick,
didn't have to bring it up myself. Good.
Any case, I watched The Lion King for the first time when it had released on the clamshell. I was 15 years old, and my mother was a fairly big Disney fan at the time, and she had brought it home as it was newly released. And I remember
Do you remember how much that VHS was?
I have no clue because she was the one who bought it. She bought it for school.
I want to say $35.
I was thinking the same.
Disney at least.
But so she was going to show it to a lot of the kids that she taught, but she brought it home because she wanted us to see it. And I remember just watching that opening scene. And yeah, it's on a lower definition TV and all this, but you know, back then we didn't know any better. And that first scene where it just, you know, opens up and you just hear the singing as it starts off, it was just a spectacular feeling. I'd never seen any advertising for it or anything like that. I had just launched into it. It was an amazing thing, even for slightly cynical 15-year-old angsty me. It was just a thing of beauty. So, and still, I think I feel a little bit of that awe today with the Blu-ray release and the 4K TV, which is slightly different, I guess, in quality.
Okay. Since we've gotten everyone's first impressions of this film, why don't we go straight into the plot? And so we have a young lion cub by the name of Simba, which, by the way, the voice talent of Jonathan Taylor Thomas, a young Jonathan Taylor Thomas at the time, which I believe he was first starting out in Home Improvement at the time.
I do believe
Did
this probably would have coincided with about season 1 of Home Improvement, or maybe season 2.
Okay.
It seems like it was quite possibly just before the climax of his fame, from what I can remember.
Because he didn't.
I was gonna say, did he ever? I was gonna say, did he ever get old? Because he just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, he was in like Tiger Beat magazine for a little while, and then he just sort of went away.
He kind of left acting. He kind of just went on to something else.
Well, yeah. Besides being besides being in A Man of the House and a few other idiosyncratic childhood movies, there wasn't a whole lot more that he was in, except for maybe Tom and Huck.
That was pretty good.
It's
what the heck is Tiger Beat?
Yeah.
Katie, what's that Tiger Beat thing you were talking about? I've never heard of that before.
That's just like a teeny bopper magazine.
Yeah.
Like for 13-year-old girls.
Yeah.
Like there's Teen Beat was another one, I think.
It sounds really lurid. Like it was like for a moment I was like, oh, is he like the guy who's in that Cool Cat costume now?
It was like the Girl Talk magazine, okay?
Right.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think they still have them, but yeah, it was just all the popular like boy bands and like young like child actors. And
it was
stuff.
like the teeny bopper version of Playgirl.
So,
now they have
probably,
like Cosmo Girl and stuff.
You probably blocked it from your memory.
Trying to, yeah, that was.
Well, how would I even know about it in the first place?
Hanson would be on.
Unless you were a young teenage girl in the 90s, no, you probably wouldn't know that.
So, what do we think about the young Simba? Do we think that he doesn't really know any better, or what do we think about that younger version of his character?
I think if we're talking about the plot overall, I think it's important for us to kind of look at.
All right. So the whole plot is basically this: we have a young royal for an animal, a long line of animal kingdomry, where obviously his father shows him everything the light touches. Is his kingdom, and he's basically teaching him how to be, his son and the future king. Basically,
so the movie starts out with Simba being born, and very quickly we get scenes of like his father, the king, talking to him about like his responsibility to take care of like their kingdom, like when he gets older.
It's a coming of age story, basically.
But you also have
tragedy.
You also have the. It's worth noting. I think Dustin, you said Macbeth, but actually Hamlet was the more. Hamlet is part of the inspiration because you also have the treacherous uncle who is responsible for bringing about the death of the king, but he tricks Simba into thinking he's responsible. So Simba goes into exile where he meets a couple of other exiles and they have fun and good times. Yeah, they have no worries. Yes. And then of course eventually things happen and he has to grow up, and that's pretty much the very short plot. But
it's a pretty simple, straightforward story that of course we've seen before.
Right.
Yeah. When I was watching it this time,
done quite this way.
When I was watching it this time, like I found myself being kind of surprised. It's like, geez, I thought there was more to the story than this. Like, this is really linear. Well, because I remember it being a lot more complicated than it was. Like, I mean, it moves from scene to scene pretty quick and pretty cleanly.
Well,
So
and
there's not
imagine
a
as
whole...
a kid what it looked like. I mean, I think it reads as a very sincere story, and a very sincere
Exactly.
film in general. Very different. I think, like, what was the movie before this? Aladdin.
Let's
You know, I think
I think so,
Right,
yeah.
right.
a little less. That movie is, I don't know. It reads differently. Like, we have the comic relief and everything in The Lion King, but I think there's just a sincerity about it that maybe we hadn't seen from Disney before that.
Well, it was definitely a more of a depressing movie, especially when Mufasa dies there for a moment. I mean, we see young Simba just there being led led to the slaughter, and
Well, we see him over his father's dead corpse, and it's like, I don't even
Right.
think Bambi's mom. We didn't even see Bambi's mom for real. Like,
Right.
and that's
And
pretty
well,
there's definitely the
dark for a Disney
comparisons
movie.
to Bambi here. Definitely the
Hmm.
comparison.
there was
Yeah, it was
definitely a
pretty dark.
darkness. There was definitely a darkness to the tragedy of Mufasa's death. So, um, after that, then
I feel like a
apparently,
lot of children were traumatized by this, yeah.
well,
Probably a
it
few.
does have to deal with a traumatization that a child has to go through. So, in a sense, he was very traumatized when his father was, taken from his eyes, and he's got to grow up with this.
And
So,
actually, from what I've heard of the early drafts of the movie and everything, I think this works better because I think in the early drafts he was traumatized, but he didn't go into exile or anything like that. And from what I understand of where they could have gone, he's a much more sympathetic character in this telling than he might have been in some of the other versions.
well, and I had forgotten that Matthew Broderick had actually voiced the older version of
Yeah.
Simba, which kind of surprised me when I rewatched this because I did not remember. I remember Jonathan Taylor Thomas like being the sensation. Oh, it's Jonathan Taylor Thomas. He's going to be in The Lion King.
Right.
It was like everyone's favorite child at that point in time. And
When you think about it, it's kind of brilliant that they got Ferris Bueller to play Simba, since he's introduced as this whole no worries kind of character.
I know it's just I don't really like him as an actor.
What, Matthew Broderick?
Not really.
Well,
I
it's
think
Matthew
he's kind of
Broderick. I
wooden.
mean, he's not in stuff anymore.
Is it
Just
me
put it
or
that
does
way.
Disney?
Actually, he is. He just does like really artsy stuff, and he does really low budget, and just he's all over the map, but he's not in the middle of the mainstream.
Is
Oh,
it me or
really?
does Disney have an addiction to orphans? They love orphaning some of their lead characters.
But
Gives them
it's easy.
adversity, built-in adversity.
And Zazu was voiced by Ron Atkins, which I know him as Mr. Bean. So,
Right.
uh,
I thought he sounded familiar. I just never put that together.
Actually, I think this would have been on the tail of Blackadder, wouldn't it? Or at least the final Blackadder season.
Yeah, because I
yeah.
think it was airing at the end of the 90s. Or the mid 90s, anyway. I can look that up. That was where I knew Rowan Atkinson from.
So
And the other big names in the cast at the time probably would have been
Jeremy Irons voiced
right.
Scar, which I
Right.
don't know why, but while my fiance and I were watching this film before, she said, "Is that Tim Curry?" I'm like, "No."
He was offered the role. Tim Curry was offered the role, and so was Malcolm McDowell. I think Jeremy Irons, I cannot unhear him as Scar,
Neither
but
can I.
both of those others fascinate me though.
Which is why when I
I
went,
can just hear Malcolm McDowell. Damn it!
see, I as well also went and saw Elton John and Tim Rice's musical adaptation of The Lion King when I was in high school because I was part of the musical crowd too. So, Mr. Thompson, our teacher at the time, took us out to see that, And I think he also took us out to see another Elton John and Tim Reese a musical called Aida, which was sometime after that. So, but in any case, going back to the storyline, so we have Scar and his goons of hyenas, which are voiced by Whoopi Goldberg, Cheech Marin, and Jim Cummings.
No, it's kind of funny.
Right.
The one that was voiced by Cheech, for a while I was like, is that Bill Moseley? Which I'm very wrong.
No.
No,
Would have been fun though.
This was another what might have been, because they actually wanted, and I think this is great for a Disney movie, that they wanted to reunite Cheech and Chong, and they could not get Tommy Chong. His schedule didn't allow it or something. So they cast Whoopi Goldberg in that role. But the two that played Timon and Pumbaa originally read for the hyenas, and they liked them so much they made them Timon and Pumbaa instead. So,
Can you
so there
imagine
was some
Nathan
different-
Lane and
in those
Ernie
parts?
Sabella.
Ernie Sabella, yeah.
Yeah.
Timon and
But
Pumbaa,
yeah.
voiced by Cheech and Chong. That would have been an interesting.
That would have been a different way of doing it too. But talking about the people who were stars when this movie came out, Whoopi Goldberg may have been one of the biggest names in the cast, and I certainly her and Cheech, like just the way they did them, those voices are also ingrained in my head.
They are definitely ingrained in my head, because I think Timon and Pumbaa kind of make the movie in a sense with their comedic,
Them too, yeah.
with their comedic presence. Now, also, Simba has a affianced when he was a child, and they have this thing that they always kind of know between each other, which I love, that they portray them to have this, romantic like quality about them, even until they're grown up age. But obviously, she has been told that that Simba has died. So years later, when she's hunting Pumbaa, she runs into Simba. So what do we think about that that particular section when she runs into
When
Simba?
he rediscovers
You
Simba
mean-
alive.
Correct.
You mean the surprisingly for grown-ups romance scene between them with the Elton John song? But yes.
With the new one coming out, people have been making memes for it, and I think one of the best ones I saw was, it's like, I can't wait to see all my favorite scenes, and it's like, a picture of a warthog, a picture of like a baby lion, and then it's a picture of like two lions like mating, and like the male's just like, rah!
But yeah, she's a fun character, and the way they do them, it is a fun role there, definitely.
There's a
Moira Kelly, by the way, the voice for her.
Alrighty. And there's another character that I think should be mentioned. All throughout this movie, there is the presence of a aging monkey that just so happens to be a baboon. And his name is Grafiki. He holds up the child in the very beginning. He's like the grandfather of all animals, and it's like he's also the
like a shaman.
He's like a shaman.
Yeah.
But it's like he's there for everybody's births too,
Right.
And
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I would think that would be. Isn't that? Never mind. No. I had a thought and I lost it.
Well, he was almost like it was midwife as well for every child or whatnot.
Yeah,
I think the idea in the beginning is the reason that he's presiding over the birth is this is going to be the future king.
Correct.
So it's a big deal. I'm not sure that it's implied that he's there for the birth of every animal in the whole savannah. But the idea is that he is like a shaman because he does sort of help Simba realize what he needs to do, after he sort of that's his coming of age moment basically, and Rafiki helps him realize that.
Well,
by
and when
bonking him
It
he's
on the
doesn't
head.
matter. It's in the past.
Yes.
when he's so I'm gonna explain that a little bit. So Timon and Pumbaa have been in his life for quite some time, and right after he's run into Nala, he has an argument with Nala and goes off and I guess while he's done this, some of his hair has ended up in the graffiti's clubhouse, wherever he is, and he realizes that Simba is alive. So I think somehow in the whole structure, he becomes Simba's guide without really having to say much.
Well, there's an undercurrent of mysticism throughout a lot of this, like especially with Rafiki, and Simba sees like his father's ghost in the stars.
Which
Right.
apparently, when he was younger, his father told him that the kings of the past looked down on him from above, which
They live in the stars, yeah.
sounded pretty awesome when James Earl Jones, the voice of Mufasa, says it, because he's got this booming voice, and you cannot mistake it, you know.
Which we somehow did not mention before, that he was Mufasa, but he was incredible in that role, and that was, yeah.
Oh yes, if anyone remembers,
He's always gonna be great.
I kept hearing at that scene him saying, "This is CNN."
Or what about that nighttime stories thing that he was on? You know, I mean, I remember his bedtime stories.
Well, back to his explanation. What do y'all think of the sequence with Simba, Timon, and Pumbaa talking about the stars?
Well, I always imagined them. I always imagined them, these big balls of gas burning billions of miles away. Pumbaa,
it's like an obvious
everything,
joke,
yes.
like
everything to you is
I don't know, it didn't quite work on me this time, but
But yeah, this was notable probably as one of the first Disney films to have a lot of flatulence humor, but it actually was done well. Not like some later things.
Well, there is something to that, especially in the Hakuna Matata song, where the only thing you get to hear about his past is that evidently his aroma has kind of like made people leave him.
Lacked a certain appeal.
So ultimately, when Simba realizes that he's got to go face his past, he ends up going back anyway. So what do we think about his decision there?
well, I mean, he has to go back because Scar is not a very good king. He's been running the kingdom into the ground, and basically, yeah. Well, basically, Scar's been like strip mining everything.
Trumping it up
Pretty much. Yeah, he was pretty bad as a ruler.
Well,
Scar's would like to call attention to him as a pretty decent villain, especially over the span of all the Disney villains. I think he's up there, probably like top 3.
And he has one of the best villain songs. That is a great sequence.
Oh yeah, I agree. At least when he first starts it, because the hyenas start marching like they're like the Third Reich or something like that, you know.
Yeah, the hyenas are like the hyenas are goose stepping.
When they're marching. So
that's sort of something I think to touch on too, because in the world of The Lion King, like the hyenas live kind of on the fringe of like the Pride Land Society.
The elephant graveyard.
And they're sort of cast as like the villains. It's sort of funny though, like in real life, hyenas tend to do more hunting than lions, and lions usually steal food from hyenas. So I thought that was kind of funny, like knowing that.
That's one of the controversies of the movie is a lot of people are like, hyenas are not presented correctly in this film, but it's like, well, it works for the story, you know?
Well, they're supposed to be in rain now, and the lions do the bidding. So,
and then, of course, you know, you got the big confrontation. You've got the requisite old school Disney thing of a sudden lightning struck fire that suddenly rears up and then dies down just at the right dramatic moment.
and
of course, the big confrontations.
I always wonder if that's a biblical thing because I see it done several times in Disney films.
I have to agree. I've seen it happen myself. The sudden fire.
It's easy
Sleeping
drama.
Beauty, Jungle Book. There's a bunch of them.
The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Which didn't that just recently have a fire?
Just yesterday.
It burned down. Yeah.
Sanctuary. Sanctuary. Anyway.
Yes, that takes on sad new meaning right now. But yeah.
Well, actually, it was a fire in Notre Dame that inspired the writing, I believe.
And then, of course, what's up? Inspired which one?
I actually believe, I think it was a fire at Notre Dame that inspired the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh, really?
The original 1921?
No, I think you mean the book, right?
Yeah, the book, the 18-something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Notre Dame has been caught fire, I mean, many times.
It's like 900 years old. Stuff has happened to it.
And the last time it burned down was in World War II, for understandable reasons.
Okay. But that was one that, that could be a whole other topic to get into.
Oh, yeah.
Especially talking about Disney.
Let's not open that can of worms right now. So
right. And then the final note is that this one does have I think, probably one of the darkest and one of the best villain deaths in any Disney film. I mean, that was a good end.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Scar tries to sell out the hyenas to Simba. It's like, oh, it was all their idea. And the hyenas are like, fuck you. And they all jump on him and kill him.
Brad?
I don't know. What do you think, Stenzi? Ed?
we don't need the quote because you don't.
That's right up there with the Gaston death in Beauty and the Beast.
Where he has like the death mark in his eyes, like as he falls.
Well, I mean,
another character that had a great villain song.
I mean, you even see a flash of lightning in that movie where you see the shadow of him being impaled.
Well, yeah.
So Disney had a
favorite one is going back to Notre Dame. My favorite one is still Frollo, and he shall smite the wicked and plunge them into a fiery pit. Immediately slips and falls into the bonfire. It's like, well, yeah,
good times.
Alrighty.
So, exactly what happens.
So ultimately, after that happens, then of course the friends come in, help save the day, including Grandpa Grafiki. And
yes.
What do we think about that taekwondo?
I always love that, especially that part where he goes Wah! And he does this punch back and hit someone. And to me, I always thought that was like copying that moment in Batman Returns, where Batman does the same thing to the guy behind him. And I'm like, Rafiki is Batman.
Well,
I always.
And I always thought that it was like a send up to Bruce Lee. So, because there are some.
It probably was.
There are some moments where Bruce Lee screamed exactly like that. But in any case,
I was less familiar with Bruce Lee as a child. Maybe I was deprived.
Moving forward. What do we think of the what do we think of the special effects for the movie, if there were any?
Well, I think we have to really more talk about the animation.
That too.
here.
You mean
And
that
I
too?
think
It was incredible.
considering, this is before Pixar, so this is traditional animation still. I thought it was really well done. There's a lot of scenes, like particularly with like a sunset scene and like where focus is changing, where it's really pretty impressive considering that this is animation. Thinking about a regular film even being able to get that focus right,
So
and
do you
they're
think that
doing it with animation. I
Um,
thought it was very well done.
this was actually done with real artists without computer?
Oh,
Well,
this is a
mostly
traditional.
was.
I've got a point on that. So this is one of the first Disney movies to use some like CG, because in the Wildebeest Stampede, they used a computer to like duplicate the wildebeest herd. And so that's
Right.
why it looks like slightly out of sync with the rest of the presentation, and that's why.
I think they used more extensive CG in Aladdin, probably. I remember they made a big deal of the CG in Aladdin, but it still was mostly hand drawn. But a really impressive point, you're talking about this being impressive, all things considered, or whatever. The really
Yeah.
impressive part is that the production for this film was simultaneous with the production for Pocahontas. And this is
Wow.
one of the points I wanted to make about Pocahontas that I think is freaking hilarious given history. Everyone at Disney thought Pocahontas was the prestige picture and Lion King was the other movie. And so their A team worked on Pocahontas. Their B team did Lion King. So this is really impressive given that it was their B team that did this movie.
Well, this was Disney's Renaissance age. I mean, they were doing hit after hit, but then showing many innovations in animation at the time. And even today, even if you hold it up against Pixar, which is just apples and oranges, in my opinion, I consider that hand-drawn animation is every bit as good, if not better in some circumstances, than computer animation. When it comes to Pixar style, it's a totally different thing. But I think, all of the advances up till they started falling flat. I think Brother Bear was the last of that renaissance, and that had already started to fall flat. I won't include Home on the Range in that.
Good.
When did those come out?
Home on the Range was what, like 01, 02, something like that. I think Brother Bear was like 2000, maybe.
Because they were putting out a bunch of films that had kind of started getting, Treasure Planet, the Atlantis films, ones that were decent and pretty good, but just didn't have the same magic as the others.
I actually think Hunchback of Notre Dame was the last one I saw. I think that was followed by, was it Hercules or Tarzan that came next? But those two,
Tarzan was 99, Hercules was 97.
Okay, yeah. I
Hercules.
never did get around to those two. But yeah, there were a lot of them in that time that have been largely forgotten, and probably for good reason in some cases.
So, does everyone think that this film's holds value, is still decent even now?
Yeah.
Well,
it has
a lot of lasting appeal. I mean, it spawned that Broadway show that ran for like ever. Like, it's
I wish
getting
I
a
could
live
have
action
seen that.
remake.
I really wish
Well,
I could have seen the Broadway show. That would have been a great one. And
It ran for
especially,
like what, 20 years?
well, and also I think Brandon, you especially, because your favorite film, the director is the one behind that production. So yeah, that would have been great.
It would have. Well, I know that I saw it once, and I was somewhat impressed with it. I mean, seeing it on stage is a hell of a lot different than seeing it in an animation, for sure. So I imagine. I mean, I know that the live action that's coming out, that's definitely not like the BBC versions of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So, but it's.
You mean the shot-for-shot remake that's coming out?
Yeah. But I don't know.
That's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah. But in any case, did anyone else have anything else to add?
Well,
Well,
we
it's also-
skipped music, which I
Yeah,
think is pretty
we didn't
important.
talk about
We
the
have
music.
This is
Pretty
almost a
decent-
musical.
Hans Zimmer
Oh,
score
full-blown
there.
musical.
Yeah, and some Elton John too. Like that stuff
Well,
was so popular in the 90s. Like I
Elton
think
John and Tim
both-
Reese.
And I believe that both of the major songs, "Can You Feel the Love Tonight," and what was the other one?
Circle of Life.
Circle. I think
Circle
they
of
both
Life,
were pretty popular that summer.
Oh, there
and then I
were-
think there was like a re-release too.
And,
Well,
and
there were-
Hakuna
there were-
Matata with all the kids.
Yeah, Hakuna Matata was the big one for the kids. And those three were actually, all three of them had Oscar nominations. And this film ended up winning for Can You Feel the Love Tonight, as well as the original score, which notably the score was by Hans Zimmer. It's one of the few Hans Zimmer scores I love. Most of his sound the same to me, and I tune them out. But I love the score for this one.
Oh, it's exquisite. I mean, as I said before, when my first impression, the music, that Circle of Life scene just blew me away when I was 15 watching it for the first time.
Well,
It's
that-
just an amazing thing to behold.
That
Well-
scene actually was the initial trailer for the film, and I remember that when I was a kid. I remember seeing that trailer before I even saw the movie. It was a heck of a way to advertise the movie.
I believe I saw the trailer before the movie because I think I went to Disney World when I was around 9, and they were foreshadowing some of the trailers even then at Universal Studios, and they had like an exhibit set up that you could, because after the movie came out, they were preparing for the musical run. So,
Have any of you all watched? It was a TV show on in that time period called The Critic. John Lovitz.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
did a
I used to.
parody of
It's one of
that.
the guys who did The Simpsons.
Where
It
they
was a
had like
weird.
the Cockroach King. They call.
It was a weird show in that it could either be really funny or like really like flat. One of the producers described the problem as it wasn't risque enough for Fox, and it was too wild for ABC.
Well, I watched
They
that.
still got
movie.
3
It's
seasons.
still a pretty broad zone there.
It stinks.
So
We have our favorite scenes in that one, definitely.
Buy my book. Buy
Did I-
my book.
did we miss
Uh.
any characters, or have we gone through all of the characters?
Did anybody talk about Nala?
We
There's
did
not a whole lot
little.
to say about her. I mean,
She
I
doesn't
think
really do anything, I
overall
guess. Yeah.
Well,
we covered the high points.
There is an interesting something I saw that like I can't like unthink this now that I've read it, and that just is really intriguing to me. But a couple things. One, the script did go through a lot of changes. They did change a lot. And apparently one of the things that was in the script that they were like, no, this is not appropriate for a Disney film, a Disney family film, but that Julie Taymor apparently put in the Broadway version was that the reason Nala was outside the Pride Lands was that Scar had tried to mate with her and she got exiled because she wasn't having it. So that's a whole different way of reading that. But once I saw that, I also saw this thing where they made a conscious effort for Scar to embody the 7 deadly sins. And that goes to hell when you don't have lust involved. But the idea, I looked at it, I'm like, he really does. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to see that they made that effort and really, yeah.
Well, he did covet Simba's mother,
A
so
little
to
bit,
speak.
yeah.
But
Probably
actually,
because she was there.
Speaking of things that you would wish you could forget, I don't know if any of y'all have seen the comic that had been going on around online, and they're talking after the scene that they have together, saying, "Well, wouldn't our father be proud?" And he's like, "Our father?" Is like, "Look, did you see any other male lions? And Scar's not my father."
I forgot about that.
Yes. And not to mention that to make the final scene seem as soon after as it does, yeah, that "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" was definitely a full-blown sex show. If you think about it that way. But at any rate, that's the one thing we haven't mentioned that is an important factor for the film is it's still by far the highest grossing hand-drawn animated film ever released. And that's I'm curious to know if it'll ever get knocked off that perch.
I
Probably not.
I don't think so, because it is definitely a well-loved classic among, among children of maybe 3-year-olds on up.
I think Disney is just leaving the hand-drawn animation forever. I think most big studios are leaving hand-drawn forever.
So it'll be up to Makoto Shinkai probably to come along and
even they're using more digital, not necessarily computer, but digital animation. And
there's a fair bit, yeah.
So, I feel like traditional hand-drawn is mostly dead, except for your occasional indie. So the big hit hand-drawn, I feel like that's done. It's unfortunately it.
I think it'll come back and be regurgitated eventually. It's just we're not in that age of needing to see the old school hand-drawn.
Well, we're never going to get one that's going to be the highest grossing hand-drawn film, though, if we ever do it again. Like, it's going to be a kitschy thing that, maybe a lower budget studio puts out or something. It's not probably going to be Disney ever again, I wouldn't think.
It's going to be a gimmick, yeah.
Right.
Princess and the Frog was Disney's last
maybe not. I think there's a chance, kind of like Dave kind of hinted at, things do go in cycles, things do come back around. Mm-hmm. And it could be that there eventually is sort of, oh, we're tired of CG. Let's do another old school, And I could see some people getting together and doing a big production. The question would be, would it connect with a big enough audience,
It's like the independent.
There was a meme I saw with the live action stuff coming out. They shared a picture of Stitch from the live action Lilo and Stitch that's kind of in development, and the take was, I can't wait to see them try to pass this gremlin creature as a dog when she picks him up from the pound. It looks like Stripe but blue.
Right. It's getting to overkill. 3 live action remakes in just a few months is kind of
it's like
crazy.
if they were tried to live action Clifford the Big Red Dog,
I'm still waiting. This is my idea for Disney. I want to see this. I want to see them do a live action redo of the Aristocats. And basically, they just take a whole bunch of cat videos and edit them together and give them celebrity dubbing.
Like they did with President Wolfman.
I guess.
See, this is where it's going to happen. It's all going to come full circle. And all the live action remakes of the animated films, they're going to eventually do animated remakes of all the live action films. And it'll come full circle.
Animated versions of all the live action. That would be interesting.
Yeah. And sad thing is, like Dustin, you were saying earlier, like maybe only a 3-year-old has never seen this movie. The sad thing is, we know we're going to feel old when we start talking to people about The Lion King and they only know the CG remake.
That's true.
That gave me an aneurysm.
That's like when I was working in
this one, though.
Yeah. But that's like when I was working in the movie theater and I was talking with these kids and they had no idea who David Copperfield was. And they
What?
had no idea who Penn and Teller
What?
were. And I was like, what?
uh, it's like the moment in Yankee Doodle Dandy when Mr. Cohan is talking to the young kids where they're doing Jeepers Creepers, and he's like he tries to mention things that he would have known when he was their age, and they're like, "Huh? What are you talking about, Pops?"
Yeah. I don't know.
Have you guys seen it? Or like Spider-Man and like Avengers or whatever? It's like, have you guys seen this really old movie called The Empire Strikes Back? And it's like, fuck you.
I remember that. That was great. And it wasn't. That was pretty much Tony Stark's reaction to it. It's like, kids, stop talking.
Alrighty. So, is there anything else that we want to mention that is in relation to this film?
Most of these animals eat each other, and so this movie is not biologically accurate.
Hey,
Thanks
Salad
for that.
does try to eat the others.
Well, it all depends on who's at top of the food chain.
Has anybody
And, actually, it's interesting that Timon knows all the different flavors. You know, he's like, tastes like chicken. I'm like, oh, when did he have chicken?
I just wanted to be obnoxious, but that's a good point.
Has anybody actually seen the one that was supposed to be the source material? I joked about it at the beginning, but supposedly Disney had taken it from a Japanese animation called Kimba the White Lion. And I've seen pictures, but I've never actually watched any episodes of it. Has anybody seen anything of it?
I've never
Was it a
seen
series
Kimba.
or a movie?
It
'Cause
was
I
a
always thought it was a
series.
movie.
I think it was a short series.
Okay.
But it was big. Like it was, I mean, it was Osamu Tezuka. I mean, it was big for Japan.
There was a lot
And-
of similar stuff too, similar
Yeah.
plot lines.
My favorite part of the trivia, one of my favorite parts of the trivia for The Lion King, is that apparently Matthew Broderick is familiar with Kimba. And supposedly, when they hired him, he thought they were making an American remake of Kimba. He apparently was dubbing his
Really?
lines, thinking that.
Huh.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, what the hell is that?
Interesting. So, anything else before we move on?
Oh,
I-
I think that's it for me.
I think we covered a pretty
Yeah,
decent
we
amount.
really did.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Managed not to go too far onto the other Disney tangents. I cannot say enough how hilarious I find it that Pocahontas was supposed to be the prestige film. I cannot get over that. And I also read that Elton John was kind of felt that he was slumming it with this one. He kind of had mixed feelings. He did make a very, very big point that he wanted a crossover pop hit, and that was one of his conditions for doing it. So he got that with "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" I mean, that's one of his biggest hits.
There was a joke in South Park around this time period where when Chef was on the show, he used to like sing songs every once in a while, and there was one song
Right.
that Chef did called "Love Gravy." And in the middle of Love Gravy, Chef is just like, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Elton John," and then they come on and like do their impression of Elton John. Oh, tonight is rough for love gravy. It was like clearly like meant to be a parody of that.
Clearly,
which I think
yeah.
I actually like more than the real thing.
Not to
'Cause it's
mention
so
that
stupid.
most of Chef's songs were dirty as hell.
Oh yes, that was the entire point.
Oh,
He
hey,
got,
I know we didn't talk about our favorites at all, but I
Oh,
did want to
yeah.
mention that I think my favorite scene in the whole movie is the opener, with all the animals kind of congregating and coming in. It feels really impactful. And I also wanted to mention how when I saw the kids do the stage performance for Lion King Jr., that was my favorite part of the stage performance as well. They had like big elephants coming down like the aisles all onto the stage, and it was really, really cool. So I just wanted to throw that little one out there because I don't think anyone had mentioned that opening sequence of the movie.
Yeah, that was my favorite as well.
Yeah. It's hard to beat, and supposedly the execs, when they put that out as the trailer, they were panicking, like everyone loved it. How are we going to live up to this?
Right.
And it was an incredible sequence. It was a great song. I mean, we should probably give credit where it's due. Hans Zimmer had a friend, Lebo M, who did the vocal arrangements for that song and did the like did chants in the background and whatever. Like he was responsible for all of that. And have got Carmen Twilly doing the lead vocals on the song. It's just an incredible music number overall. And yeah, and I would also have to say probably Scar's death scene is probably one of my very favorites. And there's a lot of little moments too that are just pretty great.
I would have to say Zazu's song is one of my favorites. I'm sorry, but when the children aren't listening to the grown up and they ditch the dodo, that was pretty much one of my favorite moments when it's Simba's song actually. Technically, because he's singing that he's going to be king, and he's basically putting on this bravado for Nala, so that they can get to the elephant graveyard. So, to me, that was kind of my teenage angst moment. So, when I was 10 years old, growing on 11, yeah, that was my teenage phase. And I knew every single word of Lion King by heart. So
yeah, we kind of skipped over I Can't Wait to Be King, but that's actually a pretty big because like you said, it's kind of a fun song, it's kind of a fun moment, and it does set up those really good, interactions. But one cool thing about it that I'd never thought of this before until I'd read it, like at the end of the song, you got that great big tower, and it just kind of falls, and Zazu's underneath the rhino's butt. But it kind of foreshadows that Simba's entire world is about to crumble, So it's kind of interesting that they did it that way. It's
although
cool.
If you watched Lion King 1.5, it was according to Timon and Pumbaa their fault that tower fell.
It wouldn't surprise me.
And it was their fault that all of the animals bowed to Simba at Pride Rock because Pumbaa farted. Yeah.
So is that just like Timon and Pumbaa's imagination, and that's the story, or I've never heard of this.
Lion King 1.5 is the movie that was. Did it come after Lion King 2: Simba's Pride, or did it come before? Trying to think.
This has a lot of weird sequels that I don't understand.
Well, apparently it's the Pumbaa and Timon story, and it's called Lion King 1.5, because they say that they've actually been. They were actually part of the story even before the story began, so they're telling their side of the story. So it's got some funny moments because it shows some of what Timon actually went through to get to this point, and that he actually had some misgivings when Simba had to go back to the Pride Lands. That he didn't say yes right away, so it was different. So, but in any case, that's pretty much the gist of it. So, did anyone else have anything else to add?
I think my favorite part is probably just like the "Be Prepared" song where Scar lays out his plan. So
okay,
yeah,
I mean, I just thought it was cool.
It's a great moment, great song.
Oh yeah.
And the
So-
visuals are, like you guys said before, the Nazi march, but also just in general with the green and the black and the smoke. And it's just a very striking sequence.
Oh yeah, and I think they used shadows pretty well in that sequence too. I mean, with what's on the background. So, in any case, if everyone is cool, I think we'll end this discussion then. I think.
Short one.
Oh yeah, but I think everything has been said, right?
I think so. Kept it tight tonight. It's
Yeah.
good.
Good times.
Alrighty. So, Katie, why don't we start with you?
Sure,
Go ahead.
Yep, I'm Katie Cadaver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a body positive horror artist, alternative model, burlesque performer and producer, Tromette, and Dead Girl with Dead Girl's Dark Coffin Classics. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. You can also find out about the burlesque that I do on Facebook by searching Grindhouse Tees. I'm also the makeup artist for the horror punk band Ratbat Spider. You can listen to them at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. And they got a couple shows coming up in May, May 3rd at the Bremen Cafe in Milwaukee, and May 4th at the Cinco de Mayo show in Wadsworth, Illinois. It's like an all-day punk party for Cinco de Mayo. So check them out. You can also find them on all the social medias as well.
Okay. Going over to you, Dustin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I have my own channel, The Crypt of Horrors, here on YouTube for my horror collecting, which is kind of my big hobby. I have an Instagram for my stuff that's never updated at DHRHunter. You can also find me causing trouble on Twitter under The Crypt of Horrors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's more or less it for now.
Okay. Going over to Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. Well, I am a movie, TV, music, book, general media collector, fan. Living here in Central Virginia, I frequently guest on Septum Sin versus the World, where we do a lot of fun news pickups and other such stuff. I'll let Brandon give more detail on that. We do have a big video coming out this week where we discuss our favorite anime series, which is going to be a lot of fun, I think. Might want to watch it in 2 parts, but it'll be worth the effort. I also have my own YouTube channel, Kotobuki Jake, which is dedicated more to nature, the natural world, and such things. I actually recorded a new video today that I intend to post probably tomorrow. So look forward to that. And I guess that'll just about do it for right now.
Alrighty. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I run a channel called Septum Sin versus the World. We are a YouTube channel that focuses on physical media, the collection of physical media, and the general love of physical media. We do pickup videos, we talk about new releases, and we do reviews. Kotobuki Jake is a frequent guest and co-host on the channel. And as he said, we have a great top 10 coming up this week. I'm hoping to have it edited and out by Friday. So everybody check that out.
Awesome. And my name is David Straggy. I have been your host for the evening. As you well know, lately all of us have been involved in hosting the Inside Movies Galore channel. So definitely stay tuned for more cool movies. And stay tuned as next week we decide to... and I was going to ask if everyone was okay if we did Cujo next week instead of the fantastic Mr. Fox. Is everyone okay?
I am down for that.
Sure. Why not?
Okay, cool. So that we can get into some Stephen King next week, so stay tuned for that, folks. And I also do reviews on this channel as well. Just right now, I've been cataloging all of my films so that we know exactly what movies are in my collection, so I can hunt them down so that we can discuss them. So, in any case, stay tuned for cool reviews and updated videos, and like, share, and subscribe, everyone. Thank you for listening, and have a great evening. Say good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
I knew somebody was going to do that. Stop singing, damn it.
All right. Night, folks.